An abused dog would not trust anyone due to trauma until he meets a disabled boy who doesn't even try to touch him, just sits there in silence. Everyone else is terrified of this giant, scarred golden retriever. They say he's too dangerous, too broken, too far gone. But the moment the boy wheels closer, the dog does something nobody has ever seen. He leans in. He chooses him. And that's when things get strange. The dog reacts to one man's voice like he remembers it, like he fears it. The boy starts remembering things too, things he wasn't supposed to remember. Suddenly, this bond isn't just sweet, it's risky. Someone wants that dog back, and they're not asking nicely. What secret ties these two broken souls together? And when the truth comes out, will protecting each other cost them everything? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below. And while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The county animal shelter buzzed with its usual morning activity, but there was an undercurrent of tension that even the casual visitor could feel. In the back corner of the facility, behind two sets of heavy doors, kennel staff gathered in hushed conversation around a clipboard, their faces drawn with concern. "He's got to be part wolf or something," whispered Sarah, one of the newer handlers, her fingers absently rubbing the fresh bandage on her forearm. "No regular golden retriever gets that big." Mark, the senior handler, shook his head as he studied the paperwork. "Pure golden, according to his intake forms. Found wandering near the industrial district 3 days ago. But those scars..." He paused, his expression grim. Someone did a number on this one. At the end of the concrete corridor, in the kennel they called the quiet room, the subject of their discussion paced. The golden retriever was massive, his muscled frame easily twice the size of a standard breed. Scars crisscrossed his golden coat like a road map of abuse, some fresh and pink, others old and white. His eyes, when they caught the fluorescent light, showed a wild panic that made even experienced staff members step back. "We can't keep him here," Mark continued, his voice heavy with resignation. "He's too dangerous. Already tried to bite through the catchpole twice. We've got 72 hours to assess him, then..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone knew what happened to unadoptable dogs. The morning wore on, marked by the steady tick of the wall clock and the occasional burst of barking from the main kennel area. At 9:45, the front desk buzzed with an incoming appointment. Physical therapy for a 12-year-old boy. Calder Briggs sat quietly in his wheelchair in the shelter's waiting area, his dark hair falling across his forehead as he studied the floor tiles. His mother was at the desk, sorting out some confusion about their appointment time. "I'm so sorry," the receptionist was saying. "Dr. Matthews is running 30 minutes behind. There was an emergency with one of our rescue cases." Calder didn't mind the wait. He'd gotten used to delays since the accident. Delays in healing, in returning to school, in everything that used to come so easily. His fingers traced the smooth metal of his wheelchair's armrest, finding comfort in its familiar texture. The shelter's atmosphere wrapped around him like a blanket of sound, the distant bark of dogs, the soft meow of cats in their cages, the squeak of rubber-soled shoes on linoleum. His mother's voice drifted over from the desk. "We can wait, of course. Whatever works best." A door at the far end of the hallway burst open, and Calder's attention snapped to the commotion. Two handlers emerged, their faces flushed with exertion. "We need the heavy-duty leash," one called out. "He's not having any of the regular equipment." The noise level rose as more staff members hurried past, their voices tight with urgency. Calder's wheelchair was positioned near the kennel entrance, and through the glass panels, he could see the source of the chaos. The golden retriever stood at the back of his kennel, his massive frame trembling with tension. His coat, despite the scars, caught the morning light and gleamed like burnished copper. But it was his eyes that held Calder's attention. Dark pools of fear and confusion that seemed to mirror something in his own heart. "We've got to move him for the vet check," Mark was saying, his voice carrying through the door. "If we can't handle him safely." The dog lunged suddenly, powerful muscles bunching as he charged the kennel door. The handlers jumped back, and someone cursed. The golden retriever's bark echoed off the concrete walls, a sound full of desperation rather than aggression. Calder wheeled himself closer to the glass, drawn by something he couldn't explain. The dog's panic felt familiar. He recognized it from his own sleepless nights, from the moments when memories of screeching tires and shattering glass threatened to overwhelm him. Without thinking, he pressed his palm against the cool glass. The golden retriever's next bark caught in his throat. Those dark eyes fixed on Calder, and the change was immediate and profound. The dog's trembling stilled. His tail, which had been tucked tight against his body, lowered slightly. "Hey," Calder said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's okay. You're safe here." The handler stood frozen, watching in disbelief as the massive dog took one step forward, then another. There was no aggression in his movement now, just a cautious curiosity. When he reached the kennel door, he lowered his head to Calder's eye level. For a long moment, boy and dog simply looked at each other. Something passed between them. A recognition, perhaps, of shared pain and the possibility of healing. The golden retriever's tail moved in the slightest wag, and Calder felt the first real smile in months tugging at his lips. "Amazing," Mark breathed, breaking the spell of the moment. "That's the first time he's approached anyone without trying to attack." Calder's mother had joined them now, her hand resting protectively on her son's shoulder. "What's his name?" Calder asked, not taking his eyes off the dog. "He doesn't have one yet," Sarah replied. "He was brought in as a stray." The golden retriever pressed his nose against the glass where Calder's hand rested, leaving a small, foggy mark. Despite the scars, despite the fear that still lingered in his eyes, there was something noble about him, something that reminded Calder of ships finding their way home through stormy seas. "Harbor," Calder said quietly. "His name should be Harbor." The dog's tail wagged again, more definitively this time, as if in agreement. The handlers exchanged glances, and Mark made a note on his clipboard. The euthanasia date still loomed, but something had changed in the atmosphere of the shelter. Where there had been resignation, now there was a spark of hope. Sarah stepped forward cautiously, holding a leash. "We still need to move him for his checkup," she said. Would you mind staying here for a moment? He seems calmer with you nearby." Calder nodded, maintaining his position by the glass. Harbor's eyes never left him, as Sarah carefully opened the kennel door. For the first time since his arrival at the shelter, the golden retriever allowed the leash to be clipped to his collar without resistance. As they led Harbor past, he paused briefly beside Calder's wheelchair. The boy reached out slowly, giving the dog time to pull away if he wanted. Instead, Harbor leaned in, gently pressing his scarred head against Calder's palm. The touch lasted only a moment, but it felt like the beginning of something important. Both boy and dog had been broken by circumstances beyond their control, but in that brief connection, they found something they had both been missing: a quiet understanding, a safe harbor in the storm. The therapy appointment was forgotten as Calder watched Harbor being led down the hallway. The massive golden retriever walked differently now, his head held higher, his steps more assured. From time to time, he would glance back at Calder, as if making sure the boy was still there. "Mom," Calder said, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "I think he needs us." His mother squeezed his shoulder. recognizing something in her son's voice that had been missing since the accident. Purpose? Hope? The first stirrings of healing. The morning sun streamed through the shelter windows, casting long shadows on the floor. But in that moment, both Calder and Harbor seemed to step into the light. The afternoon sun streamed through the shelter windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Calder sat quietly in his wheelchair, watching as Harbor paced in his kennel. The massive golden retriever's movements were different now, less frantic, more purposeful. Every few steps, he would glance at Calder, as if making sure the boy was still there. "I've never seen anything like it," Sarah whispered to Mark, both handlers standing a respectful distance away. "It's like he's a completely different dog." Calder barely heard them. His attention was fixed on Harbor, studying the way the dog's muscles tensed and relaxed, the careful way he placed each paw. The scars that crisscrossed Harbor's golden coat told stories of pain and survival, stories that resonated deeply with the boy who had his own invisible scars to bear. Without thinking about it, Calder wheeled himself closer to the kennel. His hands moved automatically, pushing the wheels with a confidence he hadn't felt since the accident. Harbor stopped his pacing, those soulful brown eyes focusing intently on Calder's approach. "Careful now," Mark called out, taking a step forward. But there was no need for concern. As Calder reached the kennel door, Harbor padded closer, his movement slow and deliberate. Gone was the aggressive dog who had lunged at handlers earlier that day. In his place was a creature moving with gentle curiosity, each step measured and careful. Calder's heart beat faster as Harbor drew near. Through the kennel bars, he could see the full extent of the dog's size. He was enormous for a golden retriever, with a broad chest and powerful shoulders. Yet there was something undeniably tender in the way he lowered his head to Calder's eye level. "You understand, don't you?" Calder whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Being scared all the time, wanting to hide away." Harbor's tail swayed slightly. Not quite a wag, but an acknowledgement. The dog took another step forward, bringing him right up to the kennel door. Calder held his breath as Harbor's massive head slowly extended through the gap in the bars. Sarah started to move forward, concern evident on her face, but Mark held up a hand to stop her. They watched in amazement as Harbor gently, ever so gently, laid his head across Calder's legs in the wheelchair. The weight was warm and solid, grounding. Calder felt tears prick at his eyes as he carefully lifted a hand and placed it on Harbor's scarred head. The dog didn't flinch or pull away. Instead, he pressed slightly closer, a small whimper escaping him, not of fear or pain, but of relief. "That's it," Calder murmured, his fingers finding a spot behind Harbor's ears that made the dog's eyes close in contentment. "You're safe now. I've got you." The moment was shattered by the sound of rapid footsteps approaching. "Calder!" Trent Briggs's voice cracked through the air like a whip. "Get away from there right now!" Harbor's head snapped up, but he didn't growl or bare his teeth. Instead, he took a careful step back, as if trying to show he meant no harm. But Trent was already there, grabbing the handles of Calder's wheelchair and pulling him backward. "Dad, wait!" Calder protested, twisting in his seat to maintain eye contact with Harbor. "He's not dangerous, he's just scared." "That dog has tried to attack 3 different handlers today," Trent said firmly, his knuckles white on the wheelchair handles. "I'm not letting you anywhere near it." "Him," Calder corrected, his voice stronger than it had been in months. "His name is Harbor, and he needs help." Trent paused, caught off guard by the determination in his son's voice. It had been so long since Calder had shown interest in anything, had spoken with such conviction. The father in him wanted to nurture this spark, but the protector in him saw only danger. "Sir," Mark stepped forward, his clipboard tucked under his arm. "I know it looks concerning, but what we just witnessed was extraordinary. Your son is the first person Harbor has allowed to touch him since he was brought in." Sarah nodded eagerly. "We've been trying for weeks to get through to him. Nothing worked until now." Harbor remained at the kennel door, his eyes fixed on Calder with an intensity that spoke of recognition and trust. There was no aggression in his posture, no hint of the violent panic that had marked his earlier interactions. "Please, Dad," Calder said softly. "Can I just sit with him for a few more minutes?" Trent looked down at his son, seeing something he hadn't seen since the accident. Hope. The darkness that had shadowed Calder's eyes these past months had lifted slightly, replaced by a determined light that reminded Trent painfully of his boy before the crash. After a long moment, Trent's grip on the wheelchair loosened. "5 minutes," he said firmly, "and the handlers stay right here." Relief flooded Calder's face as his father carefully wheeled him back to the kennel door. Harbor had waited patiently, and now he immediately resumed his previous position, laying his head across Calder's legs as if he'd found his rightful place in the world. Calder leaned forward in his wheelchair, wrapping his arms around Harbor's thick neck in a gentle hug. The dog remained perfectly still, accepting the embrace with a deep sigh that seemed to release months of tension. "I see you," Calder whispered into Harbor's fur, "and I'm not giving up on you." For the first time since the accident, since the night of screeching tires and shattering glass, Calder felt something inside him shift and settle. In Harbor's steady presence, he found an echo of his own struggle, and perhaps, just perhaps, a path toward healing for them both. Trent watched his son with a mixture of fear and wonder, recognizing that something profound was happening, but unable to shake his protective instincts. Yet he couldn't deny the transformation before him, both in the supposedly dangerous dog and in his withdrawn son. Harbor's tail had begun to wag gently, and Calder was smiling, actually smiling, as he scratched behind the dog's ears. The afternoon light caught the tears in Calder's eyes, but for once, they weren't tears of pain or frustration. They were tears of recognition, of hope, of a connection that defied explanation, but felt as real as anything he'd ever known. Jory Madsen had been watching the interaction from the corridor, her trained therapist's eye catching every nuance. She saw how Calder's shoulders, usually tensed against the world, had relaxed. She noticed how his hands, often clutched nervously in his lap, now moved with confidence as they stroked Harbor's fur. Most importantly, she recognized the spark of life that had returned to his eyes. Taking a deep breath, she approached Trent Briggs. "Mr. Briggs, could we talk for a moment?" Trent reluctantly pulled his attention away from his son, his face etched with worry. "About what?" "About what we're seeing here." Jory gestured toward Calder and Harbor. "I've been working with your son for 3 months now, and this is the most engaged I've ever seen him." "It's also the most dangerous situation he's been in," Trent countered, but his voice held a note of uncertainty. Jory shook her head. "Look at them, Mr. Briggs. Really look. That dog everyone's been afraid to approach? He's gentle as a lamb with Calder. There's something special happening here." They watched as Harbor shifted position, carefully adjusting his weight to avoid putting pressure on Calder's legs. The dog's eyes never left the boy's face, as if memorizing every feature. "I'd like to propose something," Jory said carefully. "What if we incorporated supervised visits with Harbor into Calder's therapy sessions?" "Absolutely not," Trent started to say, but Jory pressed on. "We would take every precaution. I'd be present the entire time, along with trained handlers. We could use the indoor exercise room. It's secure and private." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Mr. Briggs, Your son needs more than just physical therapy. He needs something to fight for, something to look forward to. Trent ran a hand through his graying hair, his internal struggle visible. He's been through so much already. Yes, he has, Jory agreed softly. And maybe that's exactly why he connects with Harbor. They both know what it's like to be hurt, to be afraid. Sometimes the best healing comes from helping someone else heal. Across the room, Calder's voice drifted over to them as he spoke quietly to Harbor. You're doing great, buddy. Just breathe. That's it. The massive golden retriever had completely relaxed, his head still resting on Calder's lap. The scarred face that had seemed so frightening earlier now looked peaceful, almost young. We'll start small, Jory continued. 15-minute visits 3 times a week after his regular therapy. If there's any sign of trouble, we stop immediately. Trent watched his son for a long moment. And you'll be there the whole time? Every second, Jory promised. I believe in this, Mr. Briggs. I've seen how animals can reach places in our hearts that humans can't, and I've never seen a connection like this before. As if to prove her point, Mark attempted to approach with Harbor's leash. The dog immediately tensed, a low growl rumbling in his chest. But then Calder's hand settled on Harbor's neck, and the growl subsided. It's okay, Calder said soothingly. They're just trying to help. Harbor's tail wagged once, then twice, but he kept his eyes fixed on Mark until Calder gently scratched behind his ears. Look, Calder said to his father. He listens. He wants to trust. He just needs someone to show him it's safe. The words hit home for Trent, who recognized in them an echo of his own struggles with Calder since the accident. How many times had he wished for a way to help his son feel safe again? 3 times a week, he said finally, looking at Jory. 15 minutes, and I want detailed reports after every session. The smile that broke across Calder's face was worth every bit of Trent's anxiety. Really, Dad? You mean it? We'll try. Trent emphasized the word. If Ms. Madsen thinks it might help with your therapy. It will, Jory said confidently. And Mr. Briggs, thank you for trusting us. Over the next hour, they worked out the details. Harbor would only be handled when Calder was present. The sessions would take place in the secure exercise room, with both Jory and a trained handler present. They would focus on gentle interaction and basic commands, nothing strenuous. When it was time to leave, Calder seemed reluctant to say goodbye. Harbor pressed his nose against the boy's hand, as if making a promise to wait for him. I'll be back soon, Calder whispered to the dog. Just 3 more days. As Mark approached with the leash again, Harbor's demeanor changed. He backed away, his body language showing clear distress. But then Calder spoke up. Harbor, sit, he said firmly but gently. To everyone's amazement, the dog obeyed instantly. Good boy. Now let Mark put your leash on. It's okay. Harbor remained perfectly still as Mark cautiously attached the leash, though his eyes never left Calder. It was clear to everyone present that something remarkable had happened. This wasn't just a boy calming a frightened dog. This was a partnership forming, a bridge being built between 2 wounded souls. As Trent wheeled Calder toward the exit, Jory caught up with them. Calder, you did amazing work today. I'm really proud of you. Calder's face lit up with a smile that reached his eyes, a rare sight these days. Thanks, Ms. Madsen. Do you really think we can help Harbor? I think you already are, she replied, then added with a knowing look. And I think he's helping you too. The truth of her words hung in the air as they made their way out. Behind them, Harbor watched through his kennel door, his tail wagging slightly, his eyes fixed on the boy who had somehow broken through his defenses and given him a reason to trust again. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the shelter windows as Calder finished another session with Harbor. The massive golden retriever had made incredible progress over the past 2 weeks, learning to accept gentle touches and basic commands from Calder's steady hands. Today, they'd even managed to get Harbor to shake, though he'd only offer his paw to Calder. "You're doing so great, buddy," Calder said softly, scratching behind Harbor's ears. The dog's tail thumped against the floor in contentment. His scarred face relaxed in a way that still amazed the shelter staff. Jory stood nearby, making notes on her clipboard about their progress, when the main entrance door chimed. The sound of expensive shoes clicking against the linoleum floor echoed through the shelter's corridor. "I'm telling you, that's my dog," a commanding voice carried from the front desk. "I've been searching for months." Something in that voice made Calder's stomach tighten. Next to him, Harbor's entire body went rigid. The golden retriever's ears flattened against his head, and a low rumble began deep in his chest. "It's okay," Calder whispered, but for the first time, Harbor didn't seem to hear him. The clicking footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the shelter director's apologetic murmuring. "Of course, Mr. Kessler. Right this way. Though I should warn you, this dog has some behavioral issues." A tall man in an expensive charcoal suit appeared in the doorway. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, and his polished appearance screamed success and authority. But there was something in his eyes, something cold that made Calder instinctively wheel his chair back a few inches. Raymond Kessler's confident smile faltered for just a moment when he saw Harbor. If Calder hadn't been watching so closely, he might have missed the flash of calculation that crossed the man's face. "Ah, there's my boy!" Kessler's voice boomed with forced cheerfulness. "Zeus, come here, son!" Harbor didn't move. Instead, the massive dog shifted his weight forward, positioning himself between Calder and the newcomer. The rumble in his chest grew louder. "He seems different," Kessler said, his smile tightening. "The accident must have changed him." "Accident?" the shelter director asked. "Yes, he ran away after being hit by a car. We've been devastated, searching everywhere." Kessler reached into his jacket and pulled out some papers. "I have all his documentation right here. Vaccination records, registration." Calder watched as the shelter director, Ms. Chen, began reviewing the papers. Her expression grew increasingly apologetic. "These do seem to be in order, Mr. Kessler. Though the photo... An older picture, of course, before the injuries." Kessler took a step forward. "Zeus, come." Harbor's growl became audible now. It wasn't the fearful sound he made when strange handlers approached. This was deeper, more primal. The dog's muscles were coiled tight, ready to spring, but he wasn't cowering. Instead, he stood his ground, every line of his body screaming defiance. "Harbor," Calder said softly, reaching for the dog's fur. "It's all right?" "Harbor?" Kessler's voice carried a note of displeasure. No, his name is Zeus. He's been part of our family for years, haven't you, boy?" Jory stepped forward, her clipboard clutched tight. "Sir, I'm concerned about the dog's reaction to you. If this is your pet, he should show some sign of recognition, of happiness." "He's clearly been traumatized," Kessler cut her off smoothly. "Who knows what he's been through since the accident? He just needs to come home, get back to his routine." He turned to Ms. Chen. "I can have my lawyer contact you if there are any questions about my claim." The shelter director's face fell slightly. That won't be necessary, Mr. Kessler. We just need to complete some paperwork." "No," Calder said suddenly, surprising himself. "Something's wrong. Harbor's scared of him." Kessler's eyes locked onto Calder, and the boy felt a chill run down his spine. There was nothing warm or friendly in that gaze, despite the man's continued smile. "Young man," Kessler said, his voice dangerously soft, "I appreciate that you've helped care for my dog, but Zeus belongs with his real family." "Harbor," Calder corrected firmly, though his heart was pounding. "His name is Harbor." The tension in the room ratcheted up another notch. Harbor's growl became even deeper, and Calder could feel the dog's muscles trembling with restraint. But what struck him most was that Harbor wasn't acting like his usual fearful self. This was different. The dog was protecting him. "Ms. Chen," Jory interjected, "perhaps we should discuss this further in your office? Review the procedures for claiming a stray?" "The procedures are clear," Kessler said sharply. "I have proof of ownership. The dog is mine." "Documentation can be reviewed," Jory persisted, "but Harbor's reaction raises serious concerns. As a therapy assistant, I have to note that—" "A therapy assistant?" Kessler's laugh was cold. "My dear, I don't think you understand your position here. I'm a prominent business owner in this community. I serve on the city council, and that is my dog." Calder felt tears pricking at his eyes, but he blinked them back. Something about Kessler's voice triggered a strange feeling, like a half-remembered nightmare. Harbor pressed closer to his wheelchair, still growling. "Mr. Kessler," Ms. Chen said carefully, "while your claim appears valid, we do need to follow proper protocols. Perhaps we could schedule a supervised visit first. Allow the dog to readjust." "Absolutely not," Kessler snapped, his pleasant facade cracking slightly. "I have the paperwork. I want my dog, now." Harbor's growl reached a crescendo, and for the first time, Kessler took a step back. Something like fury flashed across his face before he could hide it. "Well," he said, straightening his tie, "I can see this is going to require some additional discussion. I'll have my attorney contact you directly, Miss Chen, today." He turned to Bo. "Leave." Then paused, looking back at Harbor. "Soon, boy. We'll sort this out soon." As Kessler's footsteps faded, Harbor's growl finally subsided. The dog turned to Calder, pressing his head against the boy's chest as if seeking reassurance. Calder wrapped his arms around Harbor's neck, his hands shaking. "Did you see?" he asked Jory. "Harbor wasn't just scared, he was angry." Jory nodded slowly. "I saw, and Mr. Kessler's papers might look good, but something isn't adding up. A beloved family pet wouldn't react that way to their owner." Miss Chen wrung her hands. "Mr. Kessler is very influential in the community. If his claim is legal, then we'll need to prove it isn't," Jory said firmly. "Because that man is not Harbor's owner, at least not in any way that matters." Calder hugged Harbor tighter, feeling the dog's racing heartbeat slowly calm. "We won't let him take you," he whispered. "I promise." The late afternoon sun had shifted, leaving the room in deeper shadows. As the adults discussed next steps, Calder couldn't shake the feeling that something darker had entered their lives, something connected to both Harbor's scars and his own accident. But for now, he focused on the warm, solid presence of the dog beside him, their shared fear gradually giving way to determination. The veterinary exam room felt cold and sterile under the harsh fluorescent lights. Dr. Sarah Martinez ran her hands carefully over Harbor's massive frame, documenting each scar and old injury while Calder watched from his wheelchair. Jory stood beside him, her hand resting supportively on his shoulder. "These aren't random injuries," Dr. Martinez said quietly, parting Harbor's fur to reveal a network of scars across his chest. "The pattern is consistent with organized fighting. See these parallel marks? Those are from being held in place while—" She stopped, glancing at Calder. "It's okay," he said softly. "I need to know." The vet nodded, continuing her examination. There are defensive wounds on his legs and face. But what's most concerning are these marks around his neck and shoulders. They're from a heavy chain or restraint system. Harbour stayed perfectly still during the examination, his eyes fixed on Calder. The trust between them had only grown stronger since Kessler's appearance at the shelter 3 days ago. The microchip scan came back, Dr. Martinez said, straightening up. It's registered to an address on Industrial Park Road. Jory frowned. That's where all those storage facilities are located. Yes, the vet confirmed. Under the name of K&L Holdings. It's one of several shell companies we've traced back to Raymond Kessler. Calder's hands tightened on his wheelchair armrests. So he did have Harbour before. He hurt him. These injuries are consistent with illegal dogfighting operations, Dr. Martinez said carefully. But proving that connection legally, that's another matter entirely. Before anyone could respond, Ms. Chen appeared in the doorway, her face drawn with worry. The county board just called an emergency meeting about Harbour's case. Already? Jory asked sharply. That's unusually fast. Ms. Chen nodded grimly. Mr. Kessler has connections. They're meeting in 30 minutes. We need to go now. The county board chamber was imposing with its high ceiling and dark wood panels. Calder felt small as Jory wheeled him into position near the front. Harbour padded quietly beside them, his presence drawing disapproving looks from several board members. Raymond Kessler sat confidently on the other side of the room, flanked by 2 attorneys in expensive suits. He smiled coldly when he caught Calder's eye. The board chairman, a thin man named Gerald Walsh, called the meeting to order with 3 sharp raps of his gavel. We're here to address the ownership dispute regarding the golden retriever currently held at County Animal Control. Dr. Martinez presented her findings first, detailing Harbour's injuries and the microchip evidence. But Kessler's lawyer smoothly intercepted each point. My client operates legitimate storage facilities, the attorney stated. The registered address proves ownership. As for the injuries, they occurred after the dog was stolen from Mr. Kessler's property. He's been searching for his pet for months. That's not true, Calder burst out. Harbour's scared of him. Chairman Walsh frowned. Young man, this is a formal proceeding. Please remain quiet. Jory stepped forward, presenting documentation of Harbour's progress with Calder and their therapy sessions. This dog has shown remarkable improvement working with Calder. Their bond is therapeutic for both of them. Separating them now would be traumatic. While that's very touching, Kessler's lawyer interjected, emotional attachment doesn't override legal ownership. Mr. Kessler has provided registration papers, vet records, and proof of purchase. Calder noticed how Kessler tensed slightly at those words, though his face remained neutral. Something about those documents felt wrong, but he couldn't prove it. The board members conferred quietly among themselves. Chairman Walsh cleared his throat. Given the evidence presented, and considering Mr. Kessler's standing in our community, we see no legal reason to deny his claim. However, he paused, looking uncomfortable. Given the concerning nature of the dog's injuries and its current aggressive tendencies, we must consider public safety. Kessler leaned forward, his expression darkening. Therefore, Walsh continued, the board rules that the animal must either be returned to Mr. Kessler's custody within 48 hours or, he shuffled his papers, or be humanely euthanized as a potential danger to the community. The words hit Calder like a physical blow. Harbour, sensing his distress, pressed closer to the wheelchair, whining softly. No, Calder whispered. You can't. The board's decision is final, Walsh announced, bringing down his gavel. Kessler rose smoothly, straightening his tie. I'll have my staff collect him tomorrow morning. For his own good, of course. Calder felt tears running down his face as the chamber emptied. Harbor gently licked his hand, unaware that he'd just been sentenced to either death or a return to torture. "We can't let this happen," Jory said fiercely, kneeling beside Calder's wheelchair. "Those documents have to be fake. We just need time to prove it." "There is no time," Ms. Chen said quietly. "The ruling is effective immediately." Dr. Martinez joined them, her face grim. "I can try to file an emergency appeal based on medical evidence, but with Kessler's influence—" Calder reached out to stroke Harbor's head, his fingers trembling. The dog's warm brown eyes met his, full of trust and love. In that moment, Calder felt something shift inside him, a determination that burned through his fear and helplessness. "We can't let him go back there," he said, his voice stronger than he'd expected. "We can't let them kill him. There has to be another way." Harbor pressed his massive head against Calder's chest, as if trying to comfort him. The same dog that had terrified shelter staff just weeks ago now stood as a gentle guardian, his scars telling a story of survival that couldn't end here. Not like this. The late afternoon sun slanted through the chamber's high windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Time was running out, and they all knew it. Harbor's fate hung in the balance, caught between a powerful man's cruelty and a system that couldn't, or wouldn't, see the truth. The drive home from the board meeting was silent. Calder stared out the window, his hands clenched tightly in his lap, while Harbor lay quietly at his feet in the van's modified rear section. Trent kept glancing in the rearview mirror, worry etched across his face. "Son," he began gently, "maybe we should prepare ourselves." "No." Calder's voice was quiet but firm. "We can't give up on Harbor. There's something wrong about Kessler. I can feel it." They pulled into their driveway just as Jory's car arrived. She'd followed them home, determined not to let this be the end. As Trent helped Calder down the van's ramp, Harbor staying protectively close, Jory approached with a determined look in her eyes. "I've been thinking," she said. "Those documents Kessler presented, they seemed too perfect, too ready, like he was prepared for this exact situation." Inside the house, they gathered around the kitchen table. Harbor settled his head on Calder's lap, and the boy absently stroked the dog's scarred ears. "He was nervous when his lawyer mentioned the papers," Calder recalled. "I saw him flinch just for a second." Trent ran a hand through his graying hair. "Even if the documents are fake, proving it in 48 hours seems impossible. Kessler has money, influence, and something to hide," Jory interrupted. She pulled out her phone, showing them a news article. "3 other dogs with similar fighting injuries have been found in the county this year, all near Kessler's storage facilities." Calder leaned forward, his eyes widening. "Harbor came from one of those places. The microchip proves it." "But we need more than suspicions," Trent said, though his expression had shifted from resigned to thoughtful. "We need real evidence." Jory nodded. "I have a friend at the county clerk's office. She might be able to check those property records, see if anything looks off. My construction company did some work near one of Kessler's storage lots last year," Trent added slowly. "There were always strange noises at night. We joked about it being haunted, but—" He trailed off, looking troubled. Calder wheeled himself to the living room window, Harbor following faithfully. The setting sun cast long shadows across their front yard, reminding him how little time they had. He thought about the scars that covered Harbor's body, about the terror in the dog's eyes whenever Kessler was near. "Those other dogs," he said suddenly. "Where exactly were they found?" Jory scrolled through her phone. 2 near the Highway 37 storage facility, 1 by the old trucking depot." "That's it!" Calder turned his wheelchair around. "Dad, remember when I had that physical therapy appointment last month? We drove past the trucking depot and Harbor got really agitated in the van. Trent's eyes widened with recognition. You're right. He nearly broke through his harness trying to get away from that place. We need to look at these locations, Jory said, pulling out a map on her phone. If there's a pattern... It's dangerous, Trent interrupted. Kessler isn't just some businessman. If he really is running a fighting ring, then he's hurting more dogs like Harbor, Calder said firmly. And he hurt me too. I know it. The room fell silent. Trent stared at his son, shock written across his face. What do you mean? Calder's hands gripped his wheelchair's armrests. The night of my accident. I keep having these flashes of memory. A big truck. Harbor's face in the headlights. He wasn't just at the shelter by coincidence, Dad. He was there that night. Harbor whined softly, pressing closer to Calder's chair. The dog's eyes, usually warm and gentle, held a shadow of that long-ago night. Oh my God, Jory whispered. Harbor wasn't just a fighting dog who escaped. He's a witness. Trent sank into a chair, his face pale. The hit-and-run driver. We never found them. The police said there wasn't enough evidence. Because Kessler covered it up, Calder said, reaching down to touch Harbor's head. Harbor must have escaped that night. He tried to help me after the crash. That's why he trusts me. We saved each other. The adults exchanged looks, the pieces falling into place. Jory pulled out a notebook and began writing rapidly. Okay, we need to work fast. Trent, can you get the exact locations of those storage facilities? I'll contact my friend at the clerk's office tonight. I can do better than that, Trent said, his voice hardening. I still have the work permits from that construction job. They'll show exactly where we were, what we saw. And I can help look through the shelter's intake records, Calder added. There might be more dogs that came from those areas. Harbor watched them intently, as if understanding the gravity of their mission. His tail wagged slowly, encouragingly. It's not just about saving Harbor anymore, Calder continued, his voice growing stronger. It's about stopping Kessler from hurting anyone else. I'm not going to let him win. I'm not afraid anymore. Trent moved to his son's side, placing a hand on his shoulder. You're the bravest person I know, son. We'll figure this out together. Jory was already making calls, her voice low and urgent. Sarah? It's Jory. I need a huge favor and it can't wait until morning. They worked late into the night, spreading maps and documents across the kitchen table. Harbor remained vigilant, moving between them as if offering support. Whenever Calder showed signs of fatigue, the dog would gently nudge his hand, keeping him focused. Around midnight, Trent brought out an old construction logbook. Here, he said, pointing to an entry. 3 months before Calder's accident, we reported unusual nighttime activity to the police, but nothing came of it. Look at this, Jory added, showing them her phone. My friend found something. 2 of Kessler's property deeds have irregularities. The dates don't match the county records. Calder felt a surge of hope. That proves he's lying about something. It's a start, Jory agreed, but we need more, something concrete that links him to the fighting ring and... She hesitated, glancing at Calder. And to your accident. Harbor suddenly lifted his head, ears perked. A car was passing slowly by the house. They all froze until its headlights disappeared around the corner. We have to be careful, Trent warned. Kessler has eyes everywhere. Then we'll be smarter than him, Calder said, his voice steady. Harbor survived everything they did to him. He protected me that night. Now it's our turn to protect him. The dog pressed his head against Calder's chest, and the boy hugged him tightly. In that moment, his wheelchair didn't matter. His fears didn't matter. All that mattered was the warmth of Harbor's presence, and the certainty that they would fight this battle together. First thing tomorrow, Jory said, checking her watch. I'll take these documents to my contact at the police department. Someone there has to listen. And I'll start making calls to other contractors who worked near Kessler's properties, Trent added. Someone must have seen something. Calder looked at Harbour, seeing not the scars that marked his body, but the strength that lay beneath them. We're not giving up, he whispered to the dog. No matter what it takes, I promise. You're not going back there, and you're not leaving us. Never. Harbour's tail thumped against the floor, his eyes full of trust. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The moon hung like a pale ghost behind thin clouds as Jory killed the headlights of her truck, coasting the final quarter-mile down the dirt road. Beside her, Trent gripped his camera tightly, his knuckles white in the darkness. Are you sure about this? He whispered, though they were still alone in the cab. Jory nodded, pulling off onto a weedy shoulder near Kessler's storage facility. My contact at the clerk's office said there's been unusual activity here at night. Power usage that doesn't match any legitimate business. They sat in silence, watching the supposedly abandoned lot. A chain-link fence stretched into the darkness, topped with razor wire that gleamed dully. Beyond it stood rows of metal storage units, their doors sealed with heavy padlocks. There, Trent pointed to a faint light moving between the units. Security patrol. Jory checked her watch. They make rounds every 20 minutes. We'll wait for them to pass, then use the gap in the fence I found earlier. The minutes crawled by. A chill wind rustled through the trees, carrying with it a sound that made them both stiffen. Distant barking, quickly muffled. When the guard's flashlight disappeared around the far corner, they moved. Keeping low, they crossed the drainage ditch and reached the fence where earlier reconnaissance had revealed a loose section. Jory pulled back the chain link just enough for them to squeeze through. The concrete was rough under their feet as they crept between the storage units. The barking grew louder, coming from a large building at the back of the property. Unlike the other units, this one had ventilation fans mounted on its walls. Camera ready? Jory whispered. Trent nodded, switching on the night vision setting. They rounded the corner of the building and found a side door. It wasn't locked. They were confident in their security, Jory realized. Too confident. She eased it open, and the smell hit them immediately, the sharp tang of bleach barely masking something worse. Inside, their flashlights revealed rows of heavy chains bolted to the floor. Bloodstains that bleach hadn't quite erased. And in the back, behind a partition, they heard movement. Oh God, Trent breathed as they approached. In makeshift kennels, at least 6 dogs lay chained. Some had fresh wounds, others old scars that mimicked Harbour's. A white pit bull raised its head weakly, eyes reflecting their light. Take pictures of everything, Jory said, her voice shaking with rage. The chains, the wounds, the fighting ring in the corner, all of it. The camera's soft click seemed too loud in the heavy air. They worked quickly, documenting the evidence of Kessler's operation. Trent's hands trembled as he photographed a wall of training equipment, heavy chains, breaking sticks, injectable bottles that had no business in a legitimate kennel. A dog suddenly growled, not at them, but at something outside. Footsteps crunched on gravel. Hide, Jory hissed, pulling Trent behind a stack of crates as a key rattled in the main door. 2 men entered, their voices low but clear in the silent building. Boss wants the new ones ready by Friday, one said. Says the investors are getting impatient. That last fight cost him. Need to make it up quick. Jory felt Trent tense beside her. She pressed a hand to his arm, willing him to stay still. The men moved through the building, checking chains and water bowls. One paused near their hiding spot, close enough that Jory could smell cigarette smoke on his clothes. Hey! A shout from outside made them all jump. We've got a breach in the fence. The men rushed out, leaving the door open. Jory and Trent exchanged one quick look before running. But as they reached the door, flashlight beams swept the yard. There! By Building 3! They ran in the opposite direction, deeper into the storage facility. Behind them, voices shouted and boots pounded on concrete. A dog started barking, then another, the sound echoing off metal walls. "Split up!" Jory gasped. "Meet at the truck!" Trent hesitated for a split second, then nodded. He darted left while Jory went right, drawing some of their pursuers with her. She squeezed between two units, her heart hammering as flashlight beams crossed overhead. The fence loomed ahead, but two guards were running parallel to it. Jory doubled back, ducking into shadows, trying to keep her breathing quiet despite the burning in her lungs. She heard Trent somewhere in the darkness, the sounds of pursuit suggesting he was leading his followers away from the exit point. A guard rounded the corner ahead of her. Jory dropped and rolled under a partially opened unit door, finding herself in a space cluttered with old furniture. Through a crack, she watched boots pass by. "Check every unit!" someone shouted. "They've got to be here somewhere!" Jory waited until the footsteps faded, then crawled out the other side of the unit where a panel had rusted through. She was now behind the guards, closer to the fence. In the distance, she saw Trent's shadow moving fast toward their exit point. Taking a deep breath, she sprinted. The razor wire seemed to glitter with malice above her as she reached the gap. She squeezed through, feeling the metal snag her jacket. "Over there!" A flashlight beam caught her just as she pulled free. Jory ran flat out through the woods, branches whipping at her face. She could hear them crashing through the undergrowth behind her, but they didn't know these woods like she did. She angled towards the creek bed, half sliding down the bank and splashing through shallow water. The cold shocked her system, but she pushed on, using the water to mask her trail. After what felt like hours but was probably minutes, she reached the truck. Trent was already there, breathing hard, leaves in his hair. "Drive," he gasped as she jumped in. "Camera's safe." Jory started the engine and pulled out slowly, lights still off. Only when they reached the main road did she turn them on, hands shaking on the wheel. "Did they see your face?" she asked. "No. You?" "Just my back as I ran." She let out a shuddering breath. "But they'll know someone was there. They'll know someone has proof now." Trent clutched the camera like a lifeline. "We got what we needed. Those dogs, they were just like Harbor, and now we can prove it." "We'll take these straight to my contact at the police department," Jory said. "Tonight. No waiting." They drove in tense silence, both knowing that time was now against them. Kessler would soon discover the breach, and Harbor's fate hung in the balance. But the memory of those wounded dogs, chained in the darkness, hardened their resolve. The evidence was secure. The real fight was about to begin. The storm had been building all afternoon, dark clouds gathering like bruises across the sky. Calder sat by Harbor's kennel, watching lightning flicker through the shelter's high windows. Each rumble of thunder made the big dog press closer to the bars, seeking comfort from his young friend. "It's okay, boy," Calder whispered, reaching through to scratch behind Harbor's ears. "Just a storm. Nothing to be scared of." The shelter was quiet today. Most of the staff had gone home early because of the weather. Only Maria, the weekend supervisor, remained at the front desk. She had agreed to let Calder stay a little longer since his dad was running late picking him up. Thunder cracked overhead, making the building shudder. Harbor whined softly, and Calder noticed how the dog's eyes kept darting to the windows, tracking the storm's movement. Something about his nervousness seemed familiar, tugging at the edges of Calder's memory. "You don't like storms either, huh?" Calder said. "I used to love them before." He trailed off, his hand absently rubbing his leg where it lay useless in the wheelchair. The night of his accident was still mostly blank in his mind. The doctors said that was normal with trauma. But sometimes, when it rained like this. A car door slammed outside, the sound barely audible over the rain hammering the roof. Then a voice cut through the storm's noise, making both Calder and Harbour freeze. "I don't care about your procedures. I want that dog removed tonight, before this gets any more complicated." Raymond Kessler's voice. Sharp, angry, familiar in a way that made Calder's stomach clench. Harbour's whole body tensed, a low growl rumbling in his chest. But it wasn't an aggressive sound. It was fear. The same fear Calder had seen in him that first day, magnified tenfold. Thunder boomed again, closer now, and something shifted in Calder's mind. The sound merged with Harbour's growl, and suddenly he wasn't in the shelter anymore. He was in his mother's car, 6 months ago. Rain lashing the windshield, thunder overhead. "Mom, did you see that dog?" he asked, pressing his face to the window. There had been something moving in the darkness beside the road, something big and golden. "What dog, honey? I don't see anything." Another flash of lightning revealed a massive shape running alongside them, not running, fleeing, chain trailing behind it. Then headlights appeared behind them, gaining fast. Too fast. His mother's voice, sharp with fear. "Hold on, Calder!" The impact came from behind, sending their car spinning. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. The world turned upside down. When the motion stopped, Calder was hanging upside down in his seatbelt, his legs crushed beneath the collapsed dashboard. Rain poured in through broken windows. His mother wasn't moving. Footsteps approached on wet pavement. A familiar voice, Kessler's voice, cursing. "Find that damn dog! It couldn't have gotten far!" More footsteps, running past their wreck without stopping, without helping. Then something large pushed through the broken window beside Calder. Golden fur, wet and matted. Gentle eyes meeting his in the darkness. Harbour. The dog positioned himself over Calder's body, shielding him from the rain and broken glass. Staying with him until the sirens came, even though he was clearly terrified and hurt himself. The last thing Calder remembered was burying his face in Harbour's fur, holding on while the world spun apart around them. The memory released him with a gasp. Calder found himself back in the shelter, gripping Harbour's kennel bars so tight his knuckles were white. The dog was pressed against the gate, whining softly, trying to reach him. "It was you," Calder whispered, tears mixing with the sweat on his face. "You saved me that night. And he..." His voice broke. "Kessler did this. He was chasing you, and he hit us, and he just left us there." Harbour's brown eyes held his, full of understanding and shared pain. The dog had been running from the fighting ring that night, Calder realized, running from Kessler. Their paths had crossed at exactly the right moment, or the wrong one, depending on how you looked at it. "That's why you recognized me," Calder said softly, "and why I felt like I knew you too. We've met before." Outside, Kessler's voice rose again, arguing with someone about paperwork and deadlines. Harbour trembled at the sound, but he didn't back away. Instead, he pressed closer to Calder, as if trying to protect him again. "He's not going to hurt either of us anymore," Calder promised, his voice growing stronger. "I remember everything now, and I'm going to tell everyone what he did." Thunder rumbled once more, but this time neither of them flinched. They had both survived that stormy night 6 months ago. They had found each other again. And now, finally, the truth would come out. Calder heard the shelter's front door open, Kessler's voice getting closer. His heart raced, but he wasn't afraid. Anymore. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and pressed record, capturing the sound of Kessler's approaching footsteps and angry words. Evidence to go with his restored memory. Harbor stood tall beside him, no longer cowering. Together they waited for the confrontation they knew was coming, drawing strength from each other just as they had that night in the rain. The truth about the accident that had changed both their lives was finally surfacing, carried in on the storm. And this time, they would face it together. The storm had passed, but Calder's heart was still racing. He sat in the shelter's small break room, his hands clasped tightly in his lap as he faced his father and Jory. Harbor lay pressed against his wheelchair, a steady, protective presence. "Dad," Calder began, his voice shaking slightly. "I remember what happened that night, the night of the accident." Trent Briggs leaned forward, his face pale. Dark circles under his eyes showed the weight of 6 months' worry. "What do you mean, son?" Jory sat quietly beside them, her normally energetic demeanor subdued. She reached out and squeezed Calder's hand, giving him strength to continue. "It wasn't just a random crash," Calder said. Mom and I, we saw Harbor that night. He was running away from something, someone." He swallowed hard. "From Kessler." Trent's breath caught. "Calder, are you sure?" "I heard his voice right after the crash. He wasn't there to help us. He was looking for Harbor." Calder's words came faster now, the memories spilling out. "He hit us from behind, on purpose. He was chasing Harbor and didn't care who got in the way." Tears filled his eyes as he described the impact, the terrifying moments hanging upside down, and Harbor's unexpected rescue. "He stayed with me, Dad. He protected me until help came, even though he was hurt and scared himself." Jory pulled out her phone, fingers flying over the screen as she took notes. "This changes everything," she said. "With your testimony about that night, plus the photos we took at the storage yard." "Those dogs," Trent added grimly, "all chained up, covered in fighting wounds, just like Harbor's scars." "And I recorded Kessler at the shelter today," Calder said. "He was yelling about getting Harbor back. He sounded scary, like he did that night." Jory stood up, determination written across her face. "We need to take this to Sheriff Whitford, right now." "He wouldn't listen before," Trent reminded her. "He has to listen now. We have evidence of the fighting ring, Calder's eyewitness testimony about the crash, and Harbor himself as proof." She gestured to the golden retriever, who watched them with intelligent eyes. "Plus the vet reports showing his injuries match the fighting dogs we photographed." Calder reached down to stroke Harbor's head. "I'll tell them everything. I'm not afraid anymore." Trent looked at his son with a mixture of pride and worry. "This won't be easy, Calder. Testifying means reliving that night. And Kessler, he's dangerous." "I know," Calder said quietly. "But Harbor saved my life. Now it's my turn to save his." They spent the next hour organizing their evidence. Jory downloaded the photos from the storage yard onto her laptop, adding detailed notes about what they'd seen. Trent pulled up insurance reports from the accident, pointing out inconsistencies that hadn't made sense before, but now painted a clear picture of a deliberate collision. Calder recorded a detailed statement about his recovered memories, his voice growing stronger with each word. Harbor stayed by his side, offering silent support. "Look at this," Jory said, turning her laptop screen. "I mapped out all the locations. The storage yard where we found the fighting dogs, the crash site, the address linked to Harbor's microchip. They form a perfect triangle around Kessler's properties." Trent pulled out his phone. "I'm calling Whitford. He needs to see this now, before Kessler can move any more evidence. Or dogs." The sheriff arrived 45 minutes later, his weathered face serious as they laid out their case. He studied the photos, read through Calder's statement, and listened to the recording from the shelter. "This is what we've been waiting for," he said finally. "Enough probable cause for search warrants, real evidence of organized animal fighting, plus connection to a hit-and-run that injured 2 people, one of them a minor." He looked at Calder. "Son, are you absolutely certain about what you heard that night?" Calder met his gaze steadily. "Yes, sir. I'll swear to it in court if I have to." Whitford nodded slowly. "You probably will. This kind of case, it won't be simple. Kessler has money, influence. He'll fight back hard." "So will we," Jory said firmly. The sheriff pulled out his own phone. "I'm calling in the state police's special investigations unit. They've been wanting to crack down on fighting rings in this region. With your evidence and testimony—" He paused, looking at Harbor. "Well, let's just say things are about to get very uncomfortable for Mr. Kessler." As the adults discussed logistics, Calder leaned down to Harbor. "We did it, boy," he whispered. "We're going to make sure he can't hurt anyone else." Harbor's tail thumped against the floor, his eyes bright with trust. In that moment, Calder felt stronger than he had since before the accident. His wheelchair didn't matter. His fears didn't matter. What mattered was doing what was right. Trent came over and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Calder. Your mother would be too." "I know," Calder said softly. "She always taught me to stand up for what's right." He smiled slightly. "Even if I have to do it sitting down." Jory finished sending her evidence files to the sheriff's secure email. "What happens now?" "Now," Whitford said, "we move fast. I'll have deputies watching Kessler's properties to make sure nothing disappears while we get the warrants. You folks need to be careful. Stay together, keep your doors locked, report anything suspicious." He knelt down to Calder's eye level. "You're very brave, son. But remember, Harbor's not the only one who needs protecting. Let us handle Kessler. Your job is to stay safe and be ready to tell your story when the time comes." Calder nodded, but his jaw was set with determination. He had found his voice, his courage, and his purpose. With Harbor beside him and his family behind him, he was ready to face whatever came next. The sun was setting outside the shelter windows, painting the sky in shades of gold, the same color as Harbor's fur. As Jory and Trent gathered their things, preparing to head home and wait for the sheriff's next move, Calder felt a deep sense of peace. The truth was finally coming to light, carried by the strength of a boy and his dog, bound together by a stormy night and an unshakable bond. The early morning fog clung low to the ground as a line of sheriff's vehicles rolled silently down the gravel road toward Kessler's main storage yard. Their headlights were off, using only the dim pre-dawn light to guide them. Sheriff Whitford sat in the lead vehicle, his weathered hands tight on the steering wheel. Behind him, 6 patrol cars and 2 animal control vans followed in formation. "All units hold position," he spoke into his radio. "Wait for my signal." Through his binoculars, he could see movement inside the yard. Early morning workers arriving, unaware of what was about to unfold. The search warrant felt heavy in his breast pocket. After years of suspicions and rumors, they finally had enough evidence to act. "All units, move in. Remember, secure any persons present and protect evidence. Animal control teams, stand by for secondary entry." The convoy surged forward, lights and sirens suddenly blazing to life. Deputies poured out of their vehicles, weapons drawn, shouting commands. The workers froze, then slowly raised their hands. One tried to run, but was quickly cornered and cuffed. "Sheriff," Deputy Martinez called out, "you need to see this." Whitford followed him to a row of shipping containers at the back of the yard. The sound hit him first, a chorus of barking and whining from inside. Martinez pulled open the first container's door, revealing rows of heavy chains bolted to the floor. Each chain led to a scarred, muscled dog. Some cowered. Others lunged, showing teeth filed to points. "Dear God," Whitford muttered. He keyed his radio. "Get those animal control teams in here now, and somebody find me Kessler." The animal control officers worked methodically, documenting each dog's condition before carefully removing them to the transport vans. Many bore fresh wounds. Others had old scars like Harbor's. One by one, they were freed from their chains, each representing another charge against Kessler. "Sheriff," another deputy waved him over to a small office building. "We found records. Fight, schedules, betting sheets, payment logs. It's all here." Whitford nodded grimly. "Bag it all for evidence, every scrap of paper." His phone buzzed, the team at Kessler's house reporting in. "Sir, suspect is not at the residence, but we found more dogs in the basement. And, sir, there's a fighting ring down there. Professional setup, looks recently used. Keep searching, he has to be somewhere." Whitford turned to his deputies. "Put out an APB. Check his other properties. He knows we're coming, he won't get far." The morning wore on as they documented the horrific scope of Kessler's operation. 43 dogs rescued from the storage yard, 12 more from his house, medical equipment for patching up injured fighters, training tools designed to create aggression. Each discovery built their case stronger. At the shelter, Calder watched the news reports with Jory and his father. Local stations had camera crews at the raid sites, showing animals being carried to safety. Harbor lay at Calder's feet, unusually still, as if he understood the significance of what was happening. "They'll find him," Jory assured them. "Kessler can't hide forever." The words had barely left her mouth when Trent's phone rang. It was Sheriff Whitford. "We got him," the sheriff said without preamble. "State police picked him up trying to cross the county line. He had a bag full of cash and a one-way plane ticket." Calder let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Harbor's tail thumped against the floor. "What happens now?" Trent asked. "Now we process him. Multiple felony counts of animal fighting, conspiracy, money laundering, and thanks to Calder's testimony, we're adding attempted vehicular homicide to the list." The arraignment happened that afternoon. Kessler stood before the judge in handcuffs, his usual polished appearance disheveled. His lawyer argued for bail, citing community ties and business obligations. The prosecutor stood. "Your Honor, we have evidence the defendant was attempting to flee the jurisdiction when arrested. Moreover, the scope of his criminal enterprise suggests access to substantial hidden resources. The state requests he be held without bail." "Agreed," the judge said. "Defendant is remanded to custody pending trial." As deputies led him away, Kessler's cold eyes swept the courtroom, landing on Calder. But this time, Calder didn't flinch. He met that gaze steadily, Harbor a solid presence beside his wheelchair. Back at the shelter, the director handed Jory a document. "Emergency stay order from the judge. Harbor remains here under protective custody as evidence until the case is resolved." Jory knelt beside Calder. "Hear that? Harbor's safe. They can't take him away." Calder wrapped his arms around Harbor's neck, burying his face in the soft fur. The big dog leaned into him, offering the same comfort he had on that rainy night months ago. "We did it, boy," Calder whispered. "We really did it." The shelter staff gathered around, many with tears in their eyes. They had watched this unlikely pair heal each other, had seen a broken dog and a wounded boy find strength together. Now they witnessed justice being served, though they knew challenges still lay ahead. Trent squeezed his son's shoulder. "I'm so proud of you, Calder. Standing up to someone like Kessler took real courage." "Harbor gave me courage," Calder said simply. "He showed me that being scared doesn't mean you can't be brave." Outside, the autumn sun broke through the clouds, warming the shelter windows. Inside, Harbor stretched out beside Calder's wheelchair, sighing contentedly. His battle scars would always tell the story of his past, but his gentle eyes held the promise of a better future. The evidence teams worked late into the night, cataloging the vast operation Kessler had built. Every document, every photo, every injured animal strengthened the case against him. His empire of cruelty was crumbling, brought down by the very creatures he had abused, and the boy who had given one of them a voice. Sheriff Whitford stood in his office, studying the caseboard now covered with photos and connection lines. The scope of it all was staggering. But looking at a picture of Harbor with Calder, he felt a deep satisfaction. Sometimes justice came from unexpected places. Sometimes the smallest voices spoke the loudest truths. At the jail, Kessler sat in his cell, his influence and power stripped away. The evidence against him was overwhelming. His lawyer had already started talking about plea deals, but prosecutors weren't in a hurry to offer any. They had what they needed: documentation, witnesses, and most damning of all, the living proof of his crimes in the form of dozens of scarred and wounded dogs. The raid had exposed more than just a fighting ring. It had revealed money laundering, gambling operations, and connections to other criminal enterprises across 3 states. Federal authorities were now involved, expanding the investigation beyond county lines. Kessler's carefully constructed facade of respectability had shattered completely. The news hit like a thunderbolt. Despite the prosecutor's arguments, Kessler had made bail. Someone with deep pockets had posted the $2 million bond. That night, the shelter's security cameras went dark. When staff arrived the next morning, Harbor's kennel was empty. The lock hadn't been broken. Someone had used a key. Calder's hands shook as he gripped his wheelchair's arms. "He took him. Kessler took Harbor." Jory paced the shelter hallway, her face tight with worry. "The police are searching, but..." Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I have your dog. Quarry off Route 12. Come alone or he dies." She showed the message to Calder, whose face went pale. "We have to go." "Calder, no. It's too dangerous. We should call the police." "There's no time." His voice cracked with desperation. "You know what Kessler's capable of. He'll hurt Harbor if we don't do what he says." The abandoned limestone quarry loomed ahead as Jory drove, its white cliffs stark against the darkening sky. Calder sat tensely beside her, scanning for any sign of Harbor. They followed the winding access road down into the quarry bowl. Jory's headlights caught glimpses of rusted equipment and crumbling concrete structures. A figure stepped out from behind an old processing shed. Kessler. But no Harbor. "Where is he?" Calder demanded. Kessler's smile was cold. "You really thought I'd just hand him over?" More figures emerged from the shadows. 3 men, built like bulldozers, moving to surround them. Jory's hand tightened on Calder's shoulder as the horrible truth sank in. This wasn't a trade. It was a trap. The gravel crunched under Kessler's boots as he approached. 2 of his men grabbed Jory, while the 3rd seized control of Calder's wheelchair. "You should have stayed out of this, kid," Kessler growled, shoving Calder's wheelchair dangerously close to the quarry's edge. Loose stones skittered down the steep drop. A bark echoed across the quarry. Harbor burst from behind a storage shed, dragging a broken chain. Despite his limp and bleeding leg, the massive golden retriever charged straight at Kessler. Calder's trembling fingers found his phone in his pocket. He pressed record just as Kessler turned to face Harbor. "You worthless mutt!" Kessler shouted, kicking Harbor hard in the ribs. "Should have finished you off that night I hit the kid. But you had to play hero, didn't you? Protecting him after you escaped my fighting ring." Harbor yelped, but stayed between Kessler and Calder. His fur bristled, teeth bared in a snarl. "Got it all on video," Calder announced, his voice steady despite his fear. "Your confession. Everything." Kessler's face twisted with rage. He lunged forward, shoving Calder's wheelchair. The back wheel slipped on the loose gravel. Calder felt himself tilting backward toward the cliff edge. Time seemed to slow. He could see Jory struggling against the men holding her, could hear her screaming his name. Then Harbor was there. The dog threw his whole body against the wheelchair's side, bracing his powerful legs against the gravel. Despite his injuries, Harbor dug in, muscles straining as he prevented the wheelchair from sliding any further. Calder reached out, gripping Harbor's fur. Together they held on at the edge of the abyss, the dog once again putting his life on the line to save the boy who had fought so hard to save him. Tires screeched on gravel as two police cruisers roared into the quarry, lights flashing. Sheriff Whitford burst out of the first car, his service weapon drawn. Trent Briggs leaped from the passenger seat, his face tight with fury when he saw his son at the cliff's edge. "Raymond Kessler!" the sheriff's voice boomed across the quarry. "Step away from the boy and put your hands where I can see them!" Kessler's men released Jory and backed, away, raising their hands. But Kessler himself made one last desperate move toward Calder. Trent tackled him with the force of every father's protective instinct, driving him to the ground. They struggled in the gravel until Sheriff Whitford and his deputy pulled Kessler up and slapped handcuffs around his wrists. "I got his confession," Calder called out, his voice shaking as he held up his phone. "Everything about the dogfighting ring and the hit and run. It's all recorded." Harbor stayed pressed against Calder's wheelchair, refusing to move until Trent carefully pulled them both back from the edge. The golden retriever's sides heaved with exhaustion, but his eyes never left Kessler. "You're looking at multiple felony charges," Sheriff Whitford said, reading Kessler his rights. "Animal cruelty, operating an illegal fighting ring, hit and run with serious injury, attempted murder, kidnapping." He paused, looking at Harbor. "And now we can add witness intimidation and assault on a minor." Trent wrapped his arms around Calder, his voice rough with emotion. "You okay, son?" "I am now," Calder said, one hand still buried in Harbor's fur. "We both are." The deputies led Kessler's men to the second cruiser, while Sheriff Whitford secured Kessler in the first. Before they drove away, Whitford approached Calder. "That recording of yours," he said, "combined with the evidence from the raid and what happened here today, Kessler won't see the outside of a prison for a very long time. You did good, son. Real good." As they watched the police cars drive away, Jory knelt beside Calder and Harbor. The golden retriever's tail wagged weakly as she examined his injuries. "Nothing too serious," she said with relief, "but we should get him checked out anyway." She smiled at Calder. "You two saved each other. Again." Harbor pressed his head against Calder's leg, and Calder scratched behind his ears, right where he liked it best. The nightmare was over. Kessler would face justice, and Harbor was finally, truly safe. In the bright physical therapy room, sunlight streamed through wide windows as Jory adjusted the parallel bars. 3 months had passed since the quarry incident, and today marked a special milestone. Harbor, now officially registered as Calder's service dog, wore his new vest proudly as he stood beside the wheelchair. "Ready?" Jory asked, positioning herself on one side while Trent waited on the other. Calder nodded, his hands gripping the parallel bars. Harbor moved into position, his broad shoulders at the perfect height for support. The golden retriever had been specially trained for this moment, understanding exactly how to brace and move with Calder's efforts. With determination etched on his face, Calder pushed himself up from the wheelchair. His legs trembled with the effort, but Harbor pressed close, offering steady support. Slowly, carefully, Calder shifted his right foot forward. "That's it," Jory encouraged softly. Nice and easy. Another step followed, Harbor matching his pace perfectly. The dog's eyes never left Calder's face, reading every subtle change in his expression. When Calder's strength wavered, Harbor would lean in just a bit more, providing exactly the support needed. Trent watched with tears in his eyes as his son took 6 steps, the furthest he'd managed since the accident. When Calder finally sank back into his wheelchair, exhausted but grinning, Harbor rested his head in the boy's lap. "We did it, buddy," Calder whispered, scratching behind Harbor's ears. The golden retriever's tail wagged gently, his eyes soft with devotion. In that quiet moment, their journey from trauma to triumph felt complete. 2 survivors who had found strength in each other, now facing a future filled with hope and possibility. The scars they both carried would always be there, but they no longer defined them. Instead, it was their unshakable bond, built on trust, courage, and unconditional love, that had become their story's true legacy. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.